Hey there everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 of the V40 timing belt change. I'm going to start by putting the new water pump in place. Not quite sure yet exactly how I'm going to go about that because I've got to get the gasket in between the pump and the block without destroying the gasket and without it dropping out. So I'm going to try putting the gasket on the block. There's 2 pegs there, hopefully that might retain it. That seems to have basically worked, so try putting the pump in now. See this on camera, it kind of goes in. You've got that notch there, that's towards the block, sort of like that. Okay, as I hope you saw there, I put the gasket onto the block, and what I did is the bottom left and sort of top left, top centre, there's 2 mounting pegs. If you fit the pump onto the lower peg with the gasket already in place, you can then sort of lever the top inward slightly, just wiggle that slightly and that just slotted onto the other peg. So what I'm going to do now is get all of the water pump bolts in place and then torque them down. Don't force the bolts through at this point, because if the gasket's moved you may be pushing through the gasket, and don't tighten anything down until you've got all the bolts in, and then you can be confident you've not destroyed your gasket. Right, some of those bolts were very difficult to thread in by hand, so I'm going to try and very gently run them in with the ratchet now. If you feel it starting to tighten up on you, you've probably cross-threaded something, so stop and rectify that, don't force it. At this point I'm just putting them in enough for them to kind of bottom out, I'm not torquing them down. Okay, after you've got them all kind of bottomed out, just kind of jump around in kind of a diagonal pattern and get them all sort of snugged down. I've found conflicting information regarding the torque setting on these. Some places say it's 10, some places say it's 20, some places say it's 17. So I'm going with 17 as it's in the middle, 10 sounds too loose. So I'm going to do 17 Newton meter and see how it feels. Okay, that's the water pump in. Just general tip, after installing the water pump, make sure it turns freely, just in case you've got the wrong part or you've made a mess or something. Okay, next what we're going to do is put the new idler pulley in place. Just a fresh can of the good stuff. Don't know if any of you watch the SMA channel at all, but you notice how Mr. O's brake clean always makes that cool noise. There must be something wrong with mine. These do not appear to have ever had thread lock on them, so These are going in dry, so to speak. The water pump bolts did come pre-applied with thread lock. I did warn earlier that the lengths on those can vary. I'm thinking that maybe does not apply to engines this new, because the new bolts that came with the pump were exactly the same as the ones that came out. I mean, I've of course used them because they had the new thread lock on, but that means the thickness of the pumps is the same. So here we go, let's pop the idler pulley in. Okay, the 12mm should be torqued to 25mm. Check that spins nice, which it does. Okay folks, I'm just about to fit the new tensioner in place. Just thought I'd show you this. Just zoom me in there. What you can see, the centre of the view is the bolt hole for the tensioner. Just above it there's almost a vertical line of metal in the casting of the engine. The two so-called alignment marks on the tensioner will fit either side of that. I'll show you the tensioner now. I'll just put you back on the tripod and show you that. There's just a close-up view of that metal. It's in the centre of your screen now. Okay, I'll show you the tensioner as best I can. It's supposed to start with the Allen keyhole at the 10 o'clock position. Those two parts there, they fit back into the block either side of the metal I've just shown you, and you put the centre bolt in, just tighten it down enough so that there's no play against the block. Don't, you know, torque it, just enough to hold it in place. Then what you need to do after you fitted the belt, of course, is put a 6mm Allen in here, turn it anti-clockwise, and it will move against the belt, and that pointer will start to move across. You need to tension it far enough for that to move actually just slightly past this outer mark, and then you relax it and you set it either in line with that in the centre or in line with that depending on the temperature. That is for plus 50, that's for plus 20, and that's for minus 20. That's centigrade. So going for the middle one here, that's, you know, the standard setting. Give the tension bolt there a little clean. It's oops, sorry. The tensioner bolt, once again, didn't appear to have any thread lock on it, so that's going back in without any thread lock. That's 12mm. Spins nice and easy and no movement away or towards the block. Okay, so now the real fun is going to begin. First stage is to get the belt around the crankshaft. You may want to take a look down there to make sure it isn't dirty. because while you're feeding the belt in, you don't want to get it covered in grease or any other type of dirt. Also, make sure all your pulleys nice and clean. Even the new ones can have a coating of oil on, so you may want to give them a little bit of a wash off. The belt order is that it goes around the crank first, then around the inside of the guide pulley, and then this is probably going to be the most awkward bit. It goes over this camshaft, but because I didn't put a locking tool in place, I'm going to have to use a I think that's supposed to be a T55 in there in order to turn that back slightly. I'm not really going to be moving the camshaft, it's just taking up the spring pressure within that hub. At least I believe that's what I'm doing, to get the alignment mark, which is there, back in line with the timing mark, which is there. It only needs to go about a centimetre or so, but it's going to be very awkward to do because you're going to have to hook the belt round and move that, and hold that while you go for the next pulley, and then it's going to be under the water pump and back over the tensioner. So not sure I'll be able to talk about that as I'm doing it, because I need to kind of focus on what I'm doing, but I hope that makes sense. So it's under the crank, around the left side of the idler, over the top of the right hand cam, correcting the timing as you go if necessary, over the left hand cam, down underneath the water pump, then over the tensioner, back down to the crank. Not a bad idea to give the pulleys for the accessory belt a wash off as well. Okay, let's get hold of the belt and we'll let that all evaporate off for a little while. Right, so I've had several attempts at getting this belt on. It is not going well. So I've hopefully devised a bit of a redneck way of holding this cam phaser in place. I've got the got a Torx bit on it, on a breaker bar. I'm now going to tie this on with it's a strip off it's like a long roll of twist ties, you know, that you get with sandwich bags. A long roll of that. Tie that down to the engine bracket. Where it needs to be. Might be just very slightly too far. That's it. Yep. Okay, something's pretty wrong there. No idea how that's supposed to make it over the tensioner. Okay, one ridiculous problem at a time. There's actually a small protrusion from the block. It's hidden from view behind the balancer, and it is just in the absolute perfect place to get the timing belt wrapped around it without you realising, and that probably costs you about yay much length on the timing belt and makes it impossible to install. So I'm going to replace the tensioner and try again. Okay, the belt is finally on. Best explanation of how I did it, I got it round the crank, put the left part of the belt over the tensioner, then worked round the idler, over that cam, and I had to try and sort of thread it under the water pump, but in order to do it I had to slide it this way off the tensioner and then kind of put them both on together at the last stage. What I'm going to do is go ahead, do the tensioning procedure, and then I'm going to release this, bar the engine over several times. It's a 6mm Allen, going anti-clockwise. Let the tensioner pointer move. It's moving that way, all the way past, so just past the outer mark. Then turn it clockwise slightly. To bring it into the setting for 20 degrees Celsius. And then 12mm to lock it down. Fortunately, there's not much room here at present. Right. Tight enough for the moment. Okay. Release this apparatus. Out. Okay. Let winding begin. Okay, I've gone around a few times and the belt appears to have seated itself properly, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, that left-hand cam. Okay, kind of a strange one. It now appears that you can get a decent view of the factory mark if you put your head right down to the front wing here. Close one eye and get your line of sight right onto that mark. It does appear that the factory mark on, however the Tipex marks look just slightly off. And just out of interest, I'm going to put it on the Tipex marks and see what it looks like on the cams. Okay, the Tipex marks are right on. both of the cam marks are literally right on the right hand side of the notches, because there's about, you know, the mark on the pulley is barely visible, and the notch where it's supposed to be is, you know, maybe 5 times the width of the mark. Tipex marks are right on. And Tipex, another Tipex mark inside there. Well, that's right on. Okay, torque that 20 Newton meters. Tension is right in the middle. That cam is right in the middle. That cam is right in the middle. Factory mark looks right in the middle. Tipex marks are just fractionally off. If you move it onto the Tipex marks, the cam marks move off centre and are right on the right hand side of the marks. So I am going to call that good. Welcome back everyone. This is the fourth, I think it's the fourth, anyhow, is what will be the final work day on this. I think we're going to start out today by doing something a little bit more fun, and I'm going to start this thing up, let it run for 20-30 seconds just to see how the belt tracks. I'm not going to run it for very long because there's no coolant in the engine at this point. And then aim of the game for today is to get all this mess reassembled and, you know, have it look like a car again. So with that in mind, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to check the engine is supported. Just check there's nothing that could fall in there, such as that kind of brake clean, and connect the battery. We should be good to give this thing a start. Just going to take a last look down there. Well, here goes. Looks good to me. Right, I'm going to start putting this back together. Hindsight, one thing I really should have done, I actually could have filled the coolant system up yesterday and used the you know, the time sitting overnight to kind of help leak check the water pump, but as they say, hindsight's 20/20. Time's moving on. I need to get this thing back together, so it's gonna have to do. Right. First things first. Lower timing cover. Oh god. I think I'm gonna put a blooper reel together. See how many times before I knock the torch. Count the times the torch goes for a tumble. See how all this goes together. Yeah, I thought I'd remembered correctly. There's just the one bolt. Hope you can see that. Yeah, it was just the one bolt in the timing cover. So taking a detailed look, I can see there's 1 and 2, 3 plastic, I'm going to call those pegs, that need to go to a particular area and slot in, and on the back near the top, on that side there, and the other side there, they look like they clip into the rear case. Nope, my mistake, I think this needs to go in first. Damn it. Great, this, it's like some kind of jigsaw puzzle almost. There is a little mounting peg that fits onto. Okay, got 4 bolts to put this bracket back on. 3 the same size, 1 shorter. Shorter one goes at the front here. Okay. I think these are a 13. Yep. I'm not able to find torque settings for the engine bracket. How to say this? Tight, because it's an engine mount, but paying particular attention to the bolts going into the engine, and those 3 there, not overly tight because you're screwing into aluminium. Those bolt holes there will be a bit more forgiving, but again, it only looks like sort of like a captive nut that's been welded on, so don't go like full gorilla on it. More leverage in that. Click. Don't tell me that came off first. Yeah, anyone want to, play the video back and tell me what I'm doing wrong? Sides in. That side's in. Okay, top cover. See, assume that has to go behind. That's shaped to fit on top of the lower part of the cover, and then there's 4 areas that clip in. You do have 1 bolt, which I believe to be this funky looking little deal. Goes in there. That is 10mm. And that's only a little bolt going into aluminium, so don't go OTT on it. lift the engine back up. Okay, what you should have is 2 nuts and a bolt, but one of the studs came out because the nut is corroded to the stud, so that's going back in as one. They are a 15mm. Gonna just about feel under there that the bracket is like this part of the bracket is making contact with the engine side. I did actually come across a torque setting for those 3. It's something you know, surprisingly low value, and then an angle. I don't have an angle torque gauge, so we're going with tight but not over tight. There are a couple of little mounting pegs. Just checking the viewfinder, you can see. Yeah, there are there and corresponding on the other side, just to make sure they're in the slots, and then you're going to have 3 bolts to tighten there. So what I'm going to do now is take the jack away, and that'll settle down to where it's supposed to be. A 15 again. Be mindful of your brake lines going to the ABS here. Right, remove the remnants of your cam holding apparatus. Right, put the power steering back. I think you can just about make out the pulley on camera. There's actually 4 bolts accessible through 4 holes. From the looks of it, the top right didn't actually need to come out, but again, hindsight. Right, first bring the reservoir around, and this hose that you can see there just coming into view, that actually clips back down there on top of the frame. Just like it's a plastic sort of U-shaped clip sticking up out of the frame. Two bolts to hold the reservoir, one here, one back there. Just check the viewfinder. Yep, you can see that. Okay, there are 4 bolts that I took out the power steering. The short one doesn't actually need to come out. That's the one that goes in the top right. Don't think I said these are 12mm. Okay, be very careful with the top left. Brake lines are nicely in the way. If I didn't say, okay, 12mm, regular 12, a little wobble bar gets that one, bottom 2, deep 12, that one doesn't need to come out. Right, next, serpentine belt. Oh, no, hang on. Compare and contrast with the old one. Yep, 6 grooves, same length, and it's a double-sided belt. I remember now I had to be very careful when I was ordering the serpentine belt, because our parts place wasn't the greatest at making the distinction between this generation of engine and sort of pre-99 engines. Okay, comes under the crank, over the alternator, right round, down, back under the AC, up over the power steering, and then under the tensioner. Okay, there. Extra long 14mm. Check it's seated in its groove on all the pulleys. It is. just tweaking that belt slightly as it was making contact with the metal at the edge of the tensioner there. Right, bracket there. That is a 12 and a 12. Click. Okay, put these connectors back where they're supposed to be. Right, move that hose down, clip that into place. Since we've had that moved, I'll just check in here. Yep, plenty of it on this stick. Right, let's have a good sort of scout around, make sure nothing's left lying around down the side of the engine. I'm going to move all my tools off the top corner here now, and then have a last look around that area, make sure there's no tools or nuts and bolts that I've missed. If you do find any nuts and bolts, figure out where the nuts and bolts go. Right, okay, so after you've had a good check around the engine bay, next thing I need to do is go under the car, and along the front here I need to reattach the bottom hose over there, tighten it down. Sorry, just having a small sneezing fit there. Tighten the bottom hose down, put the under tray back. Then I need to come down here into the wheel arch, put the splash sheet, first put the little guard back around the timing belt, then put the splash shield back in, clear any tools or anything out from underneath, pop the road wheel on, loosely tighten the nuts on, lower the car, torque the wheel nuts rather. Not sure on the spec on those, I'll have to consult the internet. And then I'll bring you back, we'll fill the cooling system up, and let this little fella start and run. Okay folks, we've done all the work underneath, so it's time to get the coolant reservoir filled up. I should say the cooling system rather. This screen wash pipe's kind of in the way, so I've just unclipped it from its mountings kind of down here just to give me a bit of extra working room. Okay, took the cap off the expansion tank there. I have closed the bottom hose up, so let's get this filled up. That's almost 5 litres in. Top hose really feels like it's empty. I'm going to squeeze, try and work some of the air out of it. Same with the lower hose. I can hear a lot of air moving around, but the reservoir isn't dropping at all. In case anyone's curious, I'm putting a GO5 coolant in there. I'm going to open up this bleeder valve down here. Don't know if you can hear that hissing at all. It's still hissing away. That reservoir's nearly emptied over there. Just going to fill that up so there's some more pressure on it. Bit of a spill there, I'll have to clean that up. I've got about 5.5 litres in at this point. Okay, there's no more coming out of that bleeder valve. It's actually leaking fluid. Just nip that down. Okay, just opened up the workshop doors there so I don't gas myself. I'll start this up now and we're going to let it run until it's up to temperature. Okay, it's about halfway warmed up at the moment. It also appears the new owner's going to get a working air conditioner, which I was surprised about. Okay, I just had another go at that bleeder valve down there. Did get some more air out of it. Not quite up to temperature yet, the radiator's not getting hot. Okay, I think the top hose is just starting to warm up. Heater core hoses at the back there are nice and warm, so I think we're getting there. Hey, the top hose has gotten quite warm now. I had another go at the bleeder valve, got a bit more air out of it. It still feels like there's some air in the lower hose to me. Do be careful if you're checking that lower hose with the engine running, because it's near the fan. I'm sure you can hear that kicking on and off. Okay, I think I lost you there again at some point. Might have been talking to myself. Did try the bleeder valve on the lower hose several times again, not getting anything else out of it. The level over there has dropped a bit further. The top hose is getting nice and warm, so I've switched the car off and it's just a case of rechecking the level tomorrow when it's all cooled off. So just time to apply the finishing touch. If you found the video useful, please give it the thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it the thumbs down. Give me a comment, tell me why. Any other comments, questions, concerns, leave them down below. And if you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe and ring the bell. Thank you for watching.